What's up, everybody? We are back again. Welcome to the Collective Podcast. I am one of the hosts here. My name is Maurice. I'm so glad that all of you are listening. Today we got a special one. We got a real special one. And before I bring in my co-host, I just want to lay some groundwork, people. We as a country, we as a nation have faced a few things. And we are recording this podcast a few weeks after what I would describe as a tragedy in our country. And I think it's very important as we think about those. You know, I wrote down in my notes to give a recap of all that took place, but you have TVs. You're not living under a rock. You understand exactly what's happening in our world out there. And what I want to offer up for all of us is just to set a tone for a collective podcast because, and I don't mean to be deep, guys, but this does mean something and this through the lens of people who call themselves Christians. And so the way that I want to do that is simply reminding us before any conversation takes place, before any, we say things may not get political, but things sometimes does, before any rhetoric becomes of this conversation, I really want to put an emphasis that people's lives were lost. And I think in the conversation, sometimes we don't take time to think about that, and we don't take time to realize that eternity is on the table. And that people, they took their last breath too soon. And I don't know where they were, but let's just hypothetically speak. If they did not get a chance to meet the creator of this world, I just think that this is an opportunity missed. And this is a moment in our world. Of course, tragedy is taking place, but lives were lost. And I think at a full stop, that needs to be recognized. I don't care where you land. I don't care where you are politically. I don't care what it looks like. The humanity side of all of us, whether I agree with things or I don't, is that shouldn't have happened. And so when we turn the page now and we go into the conversation, I think it's very clear that as for me, my raw reactions, and I want to get you guys' raw reactions as well, but as for me, I'm more distraught by an image that I saw when I seen all the things taking place at the Capitol. And I think it speaks to who we are as people who call themselves Christians. That image was a flag of the United States. Next to it was a Confederate flag. Next to that was a flag that said Trump. And next to that was a flag that said Jesus. And while there can be many conversations around the first three flags and the conversations go back and forth, all those things, for me, when you insert that last flag in there, now we have a problem. And when we do not have enough guts as Christians to stand up and to be able to denounce and to be able to separate from and say, that is not Jesus, we lose our credible witness. We lose our voice in this earth. And talking to the young generation, they have eyes looking to see, oh, that's Jesus? And when we don't have anybody in the church with a voice or guts enough to say that's not, we're losing our voice. And I think this is important for us to know. And here at the Collective Podcast, that's just the tone that I want to start off with. That more than anything, my frustration comes when we have this mixed bag of all the stuff and then say yes in the name of Jesus. That's not Christ. Let us be reminded that this is not something that is a political affiliation. Above all else, we serve King Jesus. Above all else, we have a life to sacrifice for, knowing that this is not our home and that we are ambassadors to this world. So we recognize that even if I have a strong leaning in a direction, I have to be able enough to discern that when it's Jesus, and when it's not, it's not. And for me, as I set the tone for the Collective Podcast, I want to just draw the line of where we are and where we aren't. And I think that's helpful for our listeners to know that when they're wrestling through questions and wrestling where God is in all of this, well, let's just be very clear. That's not it. That is not it. And for those of you who want to bring up whataboutisms, I don't think it's clear or actually comparable in this situation, but I'll indulge you and say on any account, whether it's in the summer of 2020 or right now, riots, killings are not okay in the Christian lens. It's not okay, period. But as a Christian, I'm going to stand up and say, this is not us.
Right.
And I think it's very clear for us to make sure here at the Collective Podcast, as we set the tone, two things, and I'm going to bring my boys in. I don't want to get on soapbox, people, but here. But the two things are, lives are at stake and eternity's on the table. And on the other hand, we have to be strong enough to be able to stand up and say, this is not us, and draw the line in the sand that no matter who I am, if I'm on this side or I'm not, that's not Jesus. And I just want to make that clear, and I just want to put the tone out there for us. And that's a little bit of my raw reactions. Yeah. And I want to bring in my co-host, Justice and Christian, to bring in you guys' raw reactions. Today we're talking about the Capitol. I think that's very clear at this point. Yeah. But when you turn on the TV or turn on your phone or YouTube, whatever that may have been, give us a little bit of where you were.
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, what's up, everybody? It's Justice. Welcome back. And what was kind of crazy was that for me, going into the first week of 2021, it was kind of this weird experience for me because I was coming out of 2020 kind of with this high, right? Like I had things that were going for me. I mean, things in school, things in my career, things in family, and all this kind of stuff that was actually going pretty positive. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, life's great. You know what I'm saying? So, and then I remember, we were just in our house and Garrett comes to me and he's like, yo, are you seeing what's happening in the Capitol building? And I looked at this and I was like, what? I mean, I couldn't even, I was so distant. I couldn't, my brain couldn't even process what I was seeing. Yeah. I mean, one thing is probably because I am distant from it. In Colorado, we're not in DC, so we don't see it we're not experiencing it. Mm-hmm. But for me, I was just looking, I was like, how can this be so? Yeah. How can this be where we're at right now, where we're storming buildings? We're still at civil war with one another. Man. Over politics. Because, I mean, just for my take, right, I always look at it as we kind of towards what you spoke towards, Maurice, is we should not be putting our life based on politics. We should be living to our King Jesus, right? We should be basing our life off of following him, being loving, caring, and still receiving differences, but not bringing down our own kingdom as, being in the body of Christ or whatever. So it's I'm still processing through it because I still think it's I'm trying to learn this balance of okay, I understand where my life's at, but I can't sit here and ignore the pain, the hurt, the violence that's going on. Yeah. And I have to be able to be in that with my brothers and sisters. So,
but just real quickly too, Justice, I think when we were talking a little bit before this, it was even helpful to just bring in a perspective when it comes to, like you said, life was happening for you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a part of you that even wants
yes, not now. Right. Yeah, and yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. Me being happy, me getting to a place where I feel safe, I feel fine. Mm-hmm. Part of me, like you said, literally wanted to be I could just ignore this
turn
and
this off. Yeah,
because I'm not trying to kill my mood. I'm trying to stay positive and all that.
All things happening for you right now.
Right. But what I have to recognize is that that's not really, that's more self-indulgent than it is loving to
that's powerful.
My fellow people to be okay, my life's good, but yours isn't. See ya. Yep. And so even while I couldn't really fully process it, I mean, I remember I was talking with my uncle about it and all this kind of stuff, and I had to do some self-checking because it didn't really, it's not it kills my mood, but what I realized I had to do is I do have to empathize,
totally.
And while our privilege, I kind of spoke to before, is we are across the country, because where my heart hurt the most was imagining literally the people in DC, that are literally fearing for their lives because they're what's happening? This is
totally
terrorism.
Totally.
Yep. Can I even walk it?
Correct
family.
Word.
You know what I mean? And it's just the fact that the fact that where we are is a blessing, but at the same time, it's I can't ignore it, and I should never ever let distance or anything like that get in the way of being loving and empathizing and still entering that space with them.
Right. Totally.
So,
But figuring that out is hard, Yeah.
Hey
guys, it's Christian. I'm back. But yeah, just it's hard to figure out what to do, when you are
that's
away.
It, yeah.
And
it's true.
How do you, kind of speak truth into it and not disengage when you're not even there, you
Yeah.
know, in the place where it's happening. And so that's been one thing I've been processing. But I think my raw initial reaction was honestly like, I don't think it's as bad as they're making it look right now. Like when I first saw things coming up on my feed, I was like, they're probably just blowing it out of proportion. Who knows what happened? I'm working right now. I'll read up on it later.
Yeah.
And so that's just my like gut reaction was like, okay, just kind of almost like dismissive in a way of like, okay, they're storming the Capitol. I don't know what that means right now.
Totally.
I'll figure it out.
Yep.
But I almost was like, okay, whatever. You know, kind of like almost like my life's going right now. This doesn't affect my life right now. That was my immediate reaction. And, you know, as I'm processing it more and seeing more stuff on my feed, I'm like, okay, what's happening here? Like something went wrong. Somewhere along the way, something went wrong. And I kind of want to know what it is. So it was at that night, actually, I called a buddy who lives in Virginia. We had this conversation around it, just talking about like how these are people that have their fears rooted in something so worldly that when it's dismantled, everything feels like it falls apart. And I think like, cause he's, you know, a brother of mine that I've, you know, went on mission trip to Alaska with. So we like have that relationship founded in our faith too. But we're just like, these are people that don't fear the Lord. You know, they're waving their Jesus flag, but they don't fear Jesus. They're not actually following the man that Jesus was.
Yeah, or their lives are not submitted to Jesus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think there's a difference when it comes to people who say the name and all those things. And we're talking through the Christian lens here, and people who actually live for him. I think at some point, no matter who we are, all of our affiliations have to be laid down at some point on the road to say, I am a son and a daughter of God. And once again, for those who are listening, this is a lot of where we are leaning into today, simply for me, at least, especially because of that image. And when you decide to insert in the name of Jesus in these things, I got a problem. And I think that there's something that needs to be said in this. And I got to be fully honest, as we even talk about some of these things, you even mentioned it, there is no coming into these conversations, I think, objectively. I think sometimes we try to the best that we can, but I am a black man in America coming into this conversation. And I think what we saw more than anything is there was no more there was lots of conversation, but there wasn't a lot of the conversation that was being brought up was if this were black people. And I think that we have to cut out a corner and a space for this conversation as we see this unfold. As we're seeing all the things that's taking place, I think for many people in the country, there are minorities or people of color in these different things. No, any race, honestly, because I've seen it on many occasions. That has to be addressed, because for me, if we're speaking honestly, for me, even the image of all of the black people rushing stadium, I'm just immediately thinking multiple dead bodies, like several upon several, like just the imagery of that. And I think that if we're honest, and I don't think I stand alone, but that conversation has to be cut out and made room for when it comes to this. I don't know. What do you guys think? I just feel like this is something that has to be addressed.
100%. And I mean, it is a part of the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, literally, you go on Instagram, social media, or whatever, and it's storming with like this juxtaposition of, okay, literally, you have white people scaling the Capitol walls,
and nothing's happening.
And nothing's happening versus people literally taking knees on a lawn getting tear gassed by the SWAT team. I mean, these pictures are literally put side by side.
Some of these people are being tear gassed for climbing the walls. Yeah, but you compare that to people just taking a knee being tear gassed. You know, like for what reason? You know, it's like, okay.
And so it's like, you know, like you said, to bring that conversation in is to kind of look at literally what is the reality. Right. And what I think is interesting is like kind of taking this place that is like, you know, not being too objective, like you're saying, but like the objective truth of that is that that's literally what was happening. Like if you look at footage of when people were in the Capitol building, when you have people suited up, paint face, whatever, screaming at police officers, and they're literally just, you know, so there is this idea that like there is something awry. There's something like there's something going on where like, you know, where are we drawing the line with like justice essentially? Where is the equality kind of coming into like the space in that way?
Yeah. I think Christian brought it up before as we were kind of fleshing this out. And one of the ideas that he brought up was, are we seeing justice lived out? And just a quick point, Christian, before I toss it to you, just one of those things that really matters for me is I think now like never before, it's even just so palpable that we can see when it comes to with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., shout out to him, his birthday this weekend, would call the two Americas. And I think that we've seen this past year just the two of those things surface to the top like never before. In the summer of 2020, we saw one America rising and asking about justice, asking about these things. What is going to be happening? We, you know, all the stuff, the marches, the different things, justice needs to be had. Yeah. And if we even speak honestly, just this past, you know, a couple of weeks ago for the Capitol, there's another America in their own thinking, whether I agree or disagree, are asking, where is justice at? Right. Where is justice at? They want justice. They want to know that this is these things. And if I just take a small rant for a second, I have to, and through my lens that I'm coming to this conversation with, when one was brought up in the summer, it was sit down, trust the justice system, don't worry about it. You know, get a lawyer, figure these things out. And now, the same justice system that you told me to listen to is the one that you're saying is now corrupt. So was it corrupt when it impacted you, or was it corrupt before then? I think it's the latter. And for me, I'm not saying everything is wrong with our world and all these different things, but these are the conversations as it relates to people crying out for reform, the accountability, these things, these background checks, all these things that we're asking for. But another America comes up and is asking for the same thing. My thing in all of this is that we will not flourish as a nation unless we come together. And maybe I'm more optimistic than I think, but those two Americas has to be held to the ideals of the nation that was built on, of one nation under God, indivisible. Like these are the things that we say, but yet these two Americas. So we cannot have this conversation without filtering it through, well, when we decided to stand up and say something, where was your voice? What was said when we tried to do it? It was trust the system. And we keep saying we can't trust the system in many respects. All these different things, injustice. Are we seeing it lived out? So there's something there that I think is very important from these two divides. We're divided like never before, but in so many ways we're so intertwined because you cannot surface without me, and I cannot surface without you. And very these two have to be together. And so the justice being lived out, are we seeing that? That's a big question to throw out. I'm not saying to answer it, but you know, I want to toss in like, what is the things that come across your mind as it relates to, I mean, literally all in 1 year. You know what I mean?
All the things.
All the things.
Towards the injustice. I mean, I think, you know, like you were saying, like the end of that is, you know, with liberty and justice for all, right? Yeah. And that's like, you know, everyone wants justice, right? But everyone perceives justice in their own way. And I think that comes from the fact that people perceive injustice differently and how they experience injustice.
Talk about that.
So, I mean, like, we know the phrase, like, hurt people. And, you know, there's a lot to that. There's a lot with that in, like, kind of more mental health issues. But the reason I bring that up is just kind of the fact that what we saw this past year, you know, if we're going to compare, you know, riots throughout the years, you know, in the Capitol, like there were riots that went down around the BLM movement, which were not necessarily a result of the BLM movement, but we now have the Capitol, which is another riot situation, with people that feel hurt. And the Black Lives Matter movement is a movement because of the hurt that has been experienced for years and years and years.
1,000%.
Which is genuine hurt. But the result of hurt is often other things that get brought up. And hurt kind of produces more hurt. But what we're seeing here with the Capitol is like people that perceive themselves as being hurt, lashing out. And their perception of their hurt is not necessarily rooted in the reality of they're actually hurt, but they perceive themselves as not having justice lived out. They feel like, you know, the fact that they believe there to be voter fraud and all these things where, you know, the election was rigged and, you know, they're going to stop the steal. You know, all these things are the result of them feeling like they're living a life where they're in injustice and there's no justice being served for them. But it's coming from a privileged place where they really aren't really hurt by it.
That didn't come from the black host. I'm just trying to throw that out there.
The one white guy. And it's hard because, like, for me, you know, I am white.
No, I hear you, man.
A more conservative family. And so I am constantly at kind of war in myself, kind of like, okay, my values are more conservative economically, but socially, where do these things fit in? But what I'm seeing is the fact that people do things to try to pursue and receive justice when they feel like justice has not been served for them. And what we see at the Capitol is the result of people trying to take justice into their own hands because, you know, like you're saying, they don't trust the justice system as we have it, which like the Black Lives Matter movement essentially was pushing towards too. Like the
for years.
Justice system is not fair right now. And that's a whole nother conversation, laws and everything. But that is the heart of it. Like it's people seeing something flawed with their system. And the reality is it's these pain points, these struggles, these conflicts are coming out of a place of feeling hurt.
What are you suggesting, and this is tossing out to both of you guys, of how people steward their hurt and go about, I want to be heard in this. There's an injustice, and I think that rightfully so, people need to speak up. Rightfully so. We have in our laws as a democracy in our world, in our nation, that protests are fully legal, all these things, right? But I'm wondering, how do we in a healthy manner, when I say healthy, please, for those of you who are listening to me, what I don't mean is in this passive, soft, meek, AKA weak way of things. And I'm not saying meek is weak. I'm just saying all those things together, this sort of like push to the side. Oh, that's cool that you decide to do that. Like, because if I try to be objective in these things, whether it's the summer of 2020 or whether it's now, I'm hurt. I perceive this as being injustice, and I'm on the side for sure when it comes to the legal system and all those things, very much so, flawed and needs reform. How do I steward that hurt? Like, how do I, in a healthy manner, go about this? If riot, killings, burning police cars is not the answer, which I think we fully agree. And if Capitol building, storming, domestic terrorism also is not the answer, right? We understand where the not the answers are, right? How do we, as in many ways, as people of God, as Christians who decide to stand in this world, to, in many respects, we know what we're called to do as it relates to, we want to see heaven on earth, and we believe that when justice is when both of those are met at the same time, right? Justice is when both of those are at an intersection together, intertwined. So how do we steward that, though? I'm hurt. I'm feeling this. This has impacted me. Even many respects, it can become personal. This happened to a family member. These things have gone, throughout the generations, and I'll have to raise their niece because he's locked up over something that's stupid, and all the things, right? There's so many layers. And in many ways, it can become traumatic and so heavy on a person. Like, we're talking generations, and I'm talking through the lens of the African-American community from my experience. It can become so heavy, and all we heard last year was, I'm exhausted. Yet again, it happened again. Yet again, we see this. I'm exhausted. It's becoming heavy. What are some of the things that we can turn to for us to be in a healthy way of self-care, in a sense? We see so much that's taking place in our world. How am I caring for myself in this? How do we do that?
I actually love that you asked that question, because that's something I've been thinking about since, like, literally everything in 2020 just started, like, crashing. Like, we had the protests, the COVID, like, all this kind of stuff. And I think like the most like I'm no psychologist, right? I'm not a psychologist by training, but I do love psychology. I think it's interesting to read into.
Yep.
But one pattern that I feel like I always recognize whenever it was like adults in the room talking about politics, or if I'm working a part-time job and it's some older person talking to me about politics and I'm like, I'm just trying to make a quick buck. It's always been this idea of be on my side. From my perception, it's always been this idea of like, even if it's like a hurt conversation, or if it's just a general debate, it's be on my side, be exactly where I'm at. And I think that like, and the reason why I was like thinking about this, was because I was wondering, like, when I was watching all the things that were said about like the Black Lives Matter and all this kind of stuff, and how people were like arguing back and forth, I was sitting there, I was like, is anybody actually is anybody listening, or are you just trying to
seriously?
Are you just trying to like? Because I think what happens naturally, and this is fine, I think it is something that is a part of our subconscious. It's like, if I say something to you that for some reason in your body just triggers this defense mechanism, you immediately want to fight back, right? And you want to be like, no, you didn't get that. Be here. And one thing that I always kept thinking about is that it seems like lots of the time people want to be on the same point. I'm gonna be a little bit nerdy really quick.
Go there.
But if we are in this like 3-dimensional space, right? People want to be exactly at the same point. They want to be the exact same point. It's not possible.
You think?
At best, we can only be at the same plane. I think so. Listen, the reason why I say that is because in the heat of an argument, like think about it. Like, especially
people like difference sometimes. I think people.
No, no. I'm not saying that they don't. But in the particular case, if we're talking about things that are vulnerable, like if I'm as a young black male, if I'm talking about something about the Black Lives Matter movement, and something that you say, while your intention is not to be dismissive, I receive it as dismissive, I'm going to want to fight back. Because I'm going to be like, you just dismissed something that I take to heart very strongly, right? Even though in reality, that's probably totally not what you were doing. So I'm speaking in that space. You can have your healthy debates. I mean, me and my dad, we always act like we're in a courtroom. But the point of what I'm trying to say is that, like, when it's, people really going back and forth, like how they do on Facebook and like all this kind of stuff, it's like literally be where I'm at. And I think on both sides, it's kind of this idea of like, we always have to receive with like, I think love and truth that, now keep in mind, this is like how I think about it, but that there is margin, right? Like, no matter how much I tell you about my life, you will not experience my life.
Oh, absolutely.
You can only hear it through the way I explain it. And literally, even if I explain it with the full honesty and genuity to get my point across, you can still receive it completely different. Right. Like if I were to, like, because this is one story, because I kept thinking about this, like, even as the Black Lives Matter thing was going on. And I was just thinking about my current disposition in life, right? Yeah. Like I'll be honest, like I do feel privileged, like to be in grad school in like a beautiful place. But I literally remember, like, I think I was like 10 or something like that, maybe. And I was living in Maryland, and we were in this neighborhood that was low income kind of neighborhood. And my dad like just took me out for ice cream. We just went out for ice cream, whatever, and we're coming back, and the whole neighborhood was like gated off, cops everywhere. And we're walking in, and the cops are saying you have to park outside, you have to walk in. There was like a gang war like in the thing, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, as a kid, I wasn't thinking about it that much, and I didn't feel unsafe. I don't know. I guess I just wasn't really processing the reality that much. But I mean, I sit there and think about that. Like that community is that fear, where that fear comes from, is very, very real. And if you've never experienced it, so to me, it's like if I'm explaining something to somebody, if I'm explaining that story and I was saying like, oh, I was scared to death, literally. Gotcha. If you've never been in that environment, you cannot like experience that emotion the same way I did. Totally. And now on my end, I have to have grace for myself, right? And be like, I'm okay. So I'm not angry, right? But if I'm telling somebody else, I also have to understand you're probably not going to get it the whole way either.
I'll say, I'll say the ways that we go about that, because I think the way that I would frame it is you may not be on my side.
Right.
And I don't think you'll ever probably get on my side. But I do think when we see, especially once again through the Christian lens of this impactful incarnation of Jesus coming near to us and being proximate to, I think proximity is something that is a big factor. And when we become proximate to a problem, we really can, begin to empathize with something.
Exactly.
And I think proximity is a big factor.
Yes.
And I think when we see scriptures like mourn with those that mourn, there's a connecting with the way that I see it. I saw something that was very powerful last year that I saw was very powerful. There was a Dodgers game. Go Dodgers. I'm from LA. There was a Dodgers game, and I don't remember exactly the names, but there was a guy who was kneeling during the national anthem. Hand wasn't on his heart, and he's kneeling the entire time. Obviously, he has a strong position. Exactly where he is, he's in his own way speaking up against something. His teammates, hands on their heart, standing up, not on a knee, but have their hand on their brother's shoulder.
Yes.
That image for me is one of those images that really stuck out to me, because you may not be on my side. You may not be where I am. You may not vote like I am. You may not be going through all the things. You may not agree with a ton of the things that's taking place or how I'm going about it. But you're standing in your own shoes and you say, I see you. I hear you. Amen. And in that moment, it's this solidarity that even if I'm not going where you are, see where I am as it relates to me seeing you as my brother and me being by your side. Like that nothing takes away from that. And I think in this moment, when we talk about justice, when we talk about the different things that we are seeking, and I think our world is seeking and the earth is crying out for in many respects, where is that? Where is that imagery? And I can't help but to talk about through the church lens. Where is that when it comes to our Christian community? Now, I am very clear. I'm not being a hypocrite. We have to be able to denounce things. We have to be able to separate and say that's not us. And at the same time, what I am saying is that if we put the banner of Jesus in under and we say we submitted to all these things, where are the things where I have nowhere near you when it comes to any of these things? But as your brother, as these different things, I'm standing with you. I respect you. You know what I mean? These different things. And of course, there's going to be friction and conversation that comes about with that. There's going to be moments where there's, disconnect. But never to the point where I now see you less than. Never to the point where I can no longer empathize with you. Never to the point where I now have to go through these moments of I can't hear you. I have to unfollow you. And we go through all these shenanigans. It's never to that extent. And so for me, as you're talking about that, Justice, when it comes to, I guess a lot of what I'm saying is really in light of summer of 2020.
Right.
And that is really where I'm, as the last few minutes of what I'm talking about is in light of that.
Right. Yeah.
I was just going to say, were you about to say something?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, it's just the reality of life that empathy is understanding that you won't fully understand somebody else's situation. Powerful. Because that requires experience.
Powerful.
Yes.
Say it again.
Right.
Say it again.
Yeah, I mean, just like the fact that we can't fully understand each other without experiencing each other. And the best way we kind of can approach understanding people's stories is just being with them in their story, right?
Relationship.
It's the core of it, Like, I could hear somebody on the street, when we went into Boulder, and we were just marching, with the protest, and like we can hear people's stories there, but in the end, we're still not going to fully understand it because at the end of the day, we go our own ways, right? And we have to engage in relationship. And I use this analogy loosely, but kind of the image that popped in my head is like, if life is like almost like a campfire, we gather around it. The reality is a fire is warm. And if life is like a fire, we're going to be around it. There's going to be good things, but sometimes the fire is going to burn us and we're each going to get our scars, and we're never fully going to be able to understand what it was like to get those scars from somebody else's perspective. But we can have those people show their scars in vulnerability and honesty and kind of get to know their story. But in the end, what we're really learning to do is just gather around and look at the same fire together and just kind of teach each other what we see in life and how we've experienced life. And I just say that because the truth is we are all living this life trying to figure it out. And we're not ever going to fully understand it. We're not even going to fully understand our own experience of it. But the best way we can go about it is trying to understand other people's experiences too, to kind of give a better perspective of this life that we've only perceived through our own lens. So
if you only have an echo chamber in your life, if you only have people who think like you and people who talk like you and people who have grew up where you grew up, if there's no cross-cultural, and that's beyond race and ethnicity, if there's no cross-cultural engagement that takes place, you're a person that's full of blind spots. You're a person that is full of just ignorance and oblivion in this world. And I think when we talk about the gospel, we see Jesus urging us. First of all, it happened with him, coming from a culture of heaven to a culture of earth, cross-cultural, engaging us. But he gives us that mandate of going beyond just who we think, our lens. Because I don't see the world the way that you do. And I have a way that I'm seeing the world. But through relationship, there's a way that I can actually, in some respects, not fully, right, in just an imagery, to put on the glasses of justice. And I don't say that because you wear glasses, but but I'm saying that to say, but relationship brings that. And nothing is more powerful than relationship. And I believe when it comes to racism that we see, when it comes to the society that we're seeing ourselves in, when we come to the American divide, I can guarantee you one of the core foundations of healing this nation is going to be relationship. Not relationship like, your second cousin removed that you don't even know about. I'm in a relationship with that person. No, I'm talking about genuine relationship. And relationship doesn't always mean that it goes easy, doesn't always mean that there's not conflict. It doesn't mean, these are all things that we see scripturally. But I just think when we talk about this is powerful for us to recognize we have to be, if we're going to, in our American lens, and I've been talking about the Christian lens forever, right? As Americans and as human beings, if we live up to the ideals of this nation, that means us coming together. Now, that doesn't, once again, that's not this, kumbaya, we all pat each other on the back. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be things. I'm flawed, you're flawed.
We're going to have differences.
That's differences. That's what repentance and reconciliation and my bad, my bro, that's what that is for.
That's how you get closer.
You know what I mean? Exactly. Those are things that will take place. So I'm not saying in that regard, but we have to recognize that is going to happen. We need that now more than ever. We are so divided. We're so divided. And I know I've said that already, but
I mean, I'm just gonna say, and that starts literally close to home. Go say hi to that neighbor, that you've never seen or you never said hi to. It's and at least that perspective of, there are people right next to me that I can do life. And I know it's hard with COVID. True. Everyone has their own perception on how to engage or not engage. But the reality is, it's right there. And easiness, ease of friendship is not a prerequisite to
not at
relationship.
It's not real.
You're saying, Mo, it's sometimes the best relationships are the ones that have that kind of push,
For sure.
At least when it comes to shaping our lives. Yes. We get pushed, we get sharpened, and iron sharpens iron. And that's the reality. Jesus went into relationships. When I think about the Bible, he went into relationships that were conflict. People that pushed up against him, people that were running from him and required a lot of him. But those were the most fruitful and shaped the people in the most productive ways that spurred them on to do greater things. And we need that with each other.
And the only thing that I was thinking about that was echoing in my head is you two were talking is and you actually said it while you were talking about the campfire thing. It's the challenge that I think everybody faces. And I'm not saying this to deter, obviously. But I do think that the reason why lots of people, I think you said something that I really want to hit. So it's the idea that making relationships is hard because it requires vulnerability. True, honest, genuine love is seeing somebody at their vulnerable, right? And I think that the interesting thing that you said, Mo, a little bit earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I remember you saying. It's if you have if you have an echo chamber, right? Yes. you would think that you'd be invincible because everybody's agreeing with what you're saying and everybody's on the same side, and you're like, we're packed to the hills with the same thing.
Right. Yeah, we see what they can do.
But you're actually the most vulnerable in reality when if you actually go out and get those differences that make you self-check. You know what I'm saying? Talking about, like, say you can have some white guy or girl from Beverly Hills meet somebody, or like some Hispanic, Latino, whatever in the Bronx who's broke, bring them together. They're definitely going to have differences in perspective.
Totally.
But you know what's going to make that relationship the best? The grace for both of each other, to each other, and for themselves to be like, I know that I see different, but I want to show you love. It's almost like giving love is often, I think, at least for me, the easier thing to do. Because I'm like, I can encourage, I can do that, but to let somebody see me vulnerable, But I remember somebody told me, like, that is actually an act of love to invite somebody into a vulnerable space with you. Where you're like, I might be wrong. I might be misstepping. I might be doing this or that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I might be seeing things the wrong way. And I think that, like, lots of times in relationships, or at least trying to build those, it's like a conscious thing that I think we don't really take into account too much.
Yeah.
Because that's where I think the true fruit of the relationship genuinely goes.
Yep.
And I liked your fire analogy because it was like, you're all sitting by the fire, but you're all getting warm by something that's also dangerous. Right?
Living.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So me being vulnerable with you, it makes me warm. It makes me feel like, okay, we're bringing things to light. We're releasing things to the Lord and just like letting things go. But at the same time, you can be burned.
Totally.
But then it's always like that kind of thing, because I found myself praying about this so much because I'm very bad at being vulnerable, right? Like I literally always try and, like, cross my T's and dot my I's before anything happens. And I'm like,
polish it up.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And, in some cases that's fine, but in other cases it's kind of bad because it's like, what was I going to say? I think what I was just going to say was, like, more along the lines of, if I can't allow myself to be seen by people, then that leaves me alone and vulnerable, and more weak.
For sure. Yeah. So check this out, people. You got last words. We got last words, departing words. If you have made it this far in the podcast world, applaud to you. We are some young men that are stumbling through this world, figuring it all out. Don't have it all together in many ways. Say things and have to apologize, whatever the case may be. I'm not giving any, like, prerequisite of things that are said tonight, but I'm just simply making a point that we're making our way through this world as young adults, and this is such a journey, and we recognize more than anything the power of our voice. And when things need to be said, things need to be said. And I think tonight, as we flesh out all the things that we've been thinking about or holding on to, that's what this has been. And before I get into a little bit of what I'm saying as my last words for the Collective Podcast, is there, as we end, where would you guys want people to end on or send out on, or to sum up all of your thoughts around this conversation? Especially, being precise in the conversation of the Capitol. What do you just want to be heard in 2 to 3 sentences? What do you want to be heard from you in this moment?
I guess briefly, because we talked about this before, is that life is not a race; it's a marathon. These things are we get these blows to us, and while we do not walk over them and, like, ignore them, we do have to pace ourselves. And so that means being real with our reactions. So to those of you out there, it's like, be real with how you're reacting to it, right? Don't dismiss it. Empathize, enter that space, but don't lose hope. Hope is not to be lost. Stay in prayer and know that ultimately, we are to stay in faith to the one true King, right? And regardless of what we see in this world, which is going to be our challenges, our highs and lows, never lose sight of that. So,
right. Yeah, I mean, my heart just breaks for this year and, kind of this pivotal point we've gotten to in 2021. Everyone put they're like, 2021, it's going to be better than 2020, and then 6 days in kind of thing, everything falls apart. But I think the question that I'm asking myself, and I would almost, like, prod anyone listening, and you guys too, like, to ask is, have we seen justice served with like everything that was going on with the Black Lives Matter movement? Are we seeing it be served with the Capitol unrest right now? All these things. And deeper than that, like, what do you perceive as justice? Like, at what point do you see justice being served? What does it require? You know, at what point do we get to say, you know, okay, things are made right with these issues, because, you know, so much has not been made right yet. Yeah. And just like I love the point you made of life is a race. It's not a race, it's a marathon. It's not a race, it's a marathon. And the reality is, if we're running that with other people, some people are, you know, they're going to roll their ankle, they're going to fall down, they're going to get hurt. What are we going to do when we see that, you know? And like we were talking the other night, like, what are you going to do when those moments come? Are you going to, you know, help provide a brace for them? Are you going to go carry them as long as you can carry them? Or are you just going to sit and kind of mourn with them? Is pursuing justice an endurance thing, or is it kind of just being with people too? I just almost ask, like, where would you see yourself, as I'm asking myself that, like, when you see people that are hurting, genuinely hurting, what is your reaction, and how do you go about that? And kind of try to help make things right for them. Yeah. And are you listening to what they perceive as their needs?
Listening is powerful.
You know, to make that right.
Now more than ever, I am seeing the power of voice, the power that we hold when it comes to our words, when it comes to us speaking. And the Bible talks about that there's a time to be silent and there's a time to speak up. Yeah. And I'm just going to be honest and candid to really lay out that in many ways, I believe we have been silent long enough, whether that's the young generation, whether that's the older generation, or whether that's the church in general. There is power in your voice. There's power in your words. And if that is not in a public platform, does that always have to be on Facebook? Does that always have to be on Instagram? Maybe not. But only you know if you're speaking up. Only you know when you discern right from wrong, and yet will you sit in the moment to think, or allow people to think, that you're on the side of wrong. And I think that in all the things that we're talking about right now, people are silent under the umbrella of this is my party affiliation. And I don't think that's enough for people to be silent. And I don't think that's enough for people to not speak up. Even for me as a Christian in our own camp, I have to call a spade and to say, yes, this person has called himself a Christian, but let me go ahead and tell you, that's not us. Yeah. That's not this. This is not what we are about. As Americans, as Democrats, as Republicans, no matter where we are, no matter what we're sitting under, will we have the voice in 2021 to call a spade and to say, this is where we separate. This is where we draw the line. Yes, I love that person. Yes, person is, I stand with that person, like that person. But let me go ahead and be honest with you and say, that's not okay. Yeah. And now more than ever, our voice as the church, our prophetic voice, our witness as people in this world, if we're going to claim to be a part of this loving God, this God of justice, well, where is your voice when it comes to injustice? And so only you can answer that, podcast world. I don't know where you may be on this, and I don't know where you are, wherever you may be listening, but I want you to walk away from this, if you've made it this far in the podcast, and ask yourself, where is my voice in this? Because your voice matters, and we need your voice, and we need your contribution to this conversation, no matter how much you view it as something that's small. I can guarantee you it's the silence, like Martin Luther King said, of my brothers and sisters that hurt the most. And so for you that are out there, as your brother, I'm asking for your voice this year. I'm asking for your speaking up this year. Does that call you to be on my side for everything or agree with me on everything? No, but I'm asking, where is your voice when it comes to the God of justice, and when we see injustice, or when we see right and wrong, and we call it what it is? This is wrong. That's not Jesus. And so to end on the note that I started with, the imagery of an American flag a Confederate flag, what was my third one? A Trump flag, and a Jesus flag. Let's be very clear that one of these do not fit. We can get into other ones later, but I'm talking about a kingdom mindset right now. I don't want to get into what is this, and are you saying that Trump's Confederate, all this?
Yeah.
No.
3 of these are of
I'm
this
going to
world.
go ahead and say, exactly, 3 of these is of this world. One of these is in a very, very different category and has nowhere near, it has no place being anywhere near the 3 other ones. So let's make the distinction this year of where Jesus lies and where everything else lies.
Yeah.
And for us as Christians, our allegiance has to be above and beyond any other flag, native flag, whatever you want to call it. Jesus is the direction we're going to go. And Collective Podcasts, we want to end on this note. And I want to shout you guys out for listening, for being a part of this. Whether you are fully with us or fully not, this is what conversation is all about. And it's what coming to the table, like we see in Scripture, is all about. It's something that's powerful that's taking place. And I appreciate you all for being out there, and I appreciate you all for listening. We want to create a space where we're honest. We want to create a space where we understand where our voice lies in some of this conversation. And we are flawed human beings making our way through this world. And we appreciate you for being a flawed human being, listening to us and making your way through this world as well. Like Christian always says, life is unanswered sometimes, and we recognize that. So we sit in the uncomfort of all of this, and tonight is one of those nights where we felt the need to respond, and we collectively said, let's do this. Collectives, pun intended. So tonight is one of those special episodes, but I hope that you are able to sit with us in this, and I don't know where you may be, but we send love and blessings to you no matter who you are, because we are all worthy and made in God's image. And so Collective Podcasts, we are checking out for tonight. Love you. Co-host, thank you for being with us on tonight.
Absolutely.
This is what it's all about. But until next time, we are all about speaking up this year. Speaking up. So use your voice, 2021.
Yeah.
Peace.